Hey there, friends, and welcome to the very first episode of ADHD Adultish. I'm your host, Kim Spangler. I'm an ADHD coach and mom to some awesome ADHD kiddos. In this podcast, we are going to get real about what it's like trying to adult with ADHD. If you're here because you feel like you're constantly dropping the ball on life, forgetting appointments, or asking, why can't I just get my shit together like everyone else? Congratulations, you are exactly where you need to be. So let's buckle up and dive into today's topic: why adulting with ADHD feels like juggling flaming swords while blindfolded on a unicycle. My whole life, I rebelled against the idea of growing up. Being an adult seemed boring, monotonous, and life-sucking. Spoiler alert, I was right. Nonetheless, as I got older and my peers seemed to be getting better at adulting while I still sucked at it, I realized something. I may not want to be an adult, but I'd still like to be adultish. Because it sucks to have the water turned off yet again because you forgot to pay the bill, or to be, that one friend or family member who's always just a complete disaster. I was diagnosed with ADHD shortly before my 40th birthday, and getting to understand my brain has been life changing. It has allowed me to get better at being adultish while at the same time feeling better about being myself, even if that doesn't match the idea of what a grown up should be. As an ADHD coach, I use what I've learned to help others figure out how to not just survive, but to thrive with ADHD. And now I'm here to help you too. So, here's the big question: why does adulting feel so freaking hard when you have ADHD? So, there's not one simple answer, but today we're going to start by jumping into one of the biggest obstacles, and that is executive dysfunction. So, what are executive functions? This is kind of an umbrella term that refers to the brain's management systems. It handles things like planning, organizing, prioritizing, emotional regulation, focus, memory, and time management. You know, all of those skills that you need to be able to adult successfully, and that, people with ADHD often suck at. When you have ADHD, these management systems are often on the fritz, so that's why things like remembering to get milk on the way home from work, or getting your kids out the door on time to school feels like monumental tasks, when for other people, it looks like they're able to do these things pretty easily. For every person with ADHD, there is a different combination of struggles. None of us have just the exact same symptoms or extent of symptoms. It is a spectrum. And some people may have no problems with planning, but have, really terrible working memory. They may be terrible at time management, but can actually focus pretty well on boring stuff. So if you don't have issues with everything on this list, then awesome. If you do, that's okay. There are things that we can do to help with everything. Today, we are going to talk about just a few things. Before we jump into some of my favorite tips for managing the adulting with ADHD conundrum, we need to talk about a few things. To start with, the thing about managing ADHD is that we are not all the same. So what works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for your child or your husband or your parent with ADHD. You have to find the thing for you. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It is not a magic pill, although, of course, medication can be very helpful. It is more like a build your own adulting toolkit kind of deal. So you have to find what makes your brain tick, what motivates you, what keeps you engaged, and that's where you start with building the management strategies that can be lasting. Once you find the strategies that work, then you work on finding the ways to keep them going. Because I'm sure that we have all started some amazing new routine that we lasted about 3 days for. if we were lucky. But that doesn't mean that the routine was bad or that it can't work for you. That doesn't mean that any of the other things that you've tried can't work for you. It does not mean you are a failure, and it does not mean that nothing will ever work. It just means that either A, that wasn't your own personal ADHD cheat code, or B, you need a little bit of help in figuring out the next step after finding the thing that works. Now, let's dig in. Tip number 1, do not try to fix all of the things at once. Let me repeat that. Do not try to fix all of the things at once. I know. When an ADHD brain gets excited about something, it is in our nature to kind of want to dive all in on it. I'm sure that you have had, a new hobby that you went out and bought all the things for and then didn't end up using all the things. We can hyper focus. We can get very single-minded about something and burn out very quickly. So when you look at your life and you think, I have these 5 things that I want to completely change. This is what I want to change. I want to, I want to be a person who works out every day and cooks meals at home and is on time to work all the time, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you think tomorrow's going to be the day. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and it's all going to be different. I'm going to do all of these things. Maybe it will work tomorrow. Maybe it won't. It will not work forever. And while I love your enthusiasm, I love my own enthusiasm because I do the same things. The key to long-term and successful evolution is, and I know nobody wants to hear this, I know, but is slow and steady wins the race. And we are not good at slow and steady, typically, especially if you lean more to the hyperactive spectrum. But there are ways to make the slow and steady road a little bit more ADHD friendly. And we will get into that more as the podcast goes on. This is only the first episode, so stick with me. Now, tip number 2. Wherever you can, externalize your executive function. What do I mean? So it's about, I was going to say, getting your brain out of your head and into the world. That doesn't necessarily sound right. I don't mean to put your brain in a jar. I mean to take the executive function load off of your brain and put it onto something else that doesn't have as much going on as you do. So we struggle with planning, organizing, remembering things because our executive functions are not reliable. But there are plenty of ADHD-friendly hacks that you can use to help to externalize these things and make it easier to adult. So I'm going to, again, later episodes, we will go further into different aspects of these things, but this is just my quick go-tos of things that personally I find very helpful. Timers, I know. So people have probably told you timers. But for me, one of the executive functions that I have struggled with most in my life is task initiation. If there was an executive dysfunction Olympics, I would definitely medal in procrastination. Maybe not gold. I would say probably silver, though, for sure. I have played around with so many hacks to overcome procrastination, and the quickest and easiest way for me to get moving always comes back to this. Set a timer for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and just start doing the damn thing. Do it slowly, do it badly, do it whatever way you are capable of doing it, but promise yourself you will do it for that 5 minutes. Giving it that super short amount of time, it takes the pressure off, and knowing that you can stop can make it easier to start. Now, sometimes once you're rolling, you might find that you can keep going, but if you don't, I want you to promise me that you will not get mad at yourself. If you decided on a 5-minute minimum of putting laundry away, or gathering up receipts for your taxes, or writing the novel that you always said you were going to start someday, whatever it is, at the end of that 5 minutes, you have to give yourself permission to stop working and celebrate that you did the damn thing for as long as you said you would do it. At first, your brain will want to argue with you that you could have kept going and try to make you feel bad that you didn't do more. Tell your brain I said to fuck off. Next tip, external reminders. If you want to have an actual chance of remembering something, count on not remembering it. Sticky notes, phone reminders, alarms. Use them liberally, but don't just do it willy-nilly. Sit down and think about the things that you actually use or that have worked in the past. For me, it always comes back to the Notes app on my phone and Google Calendar. If I have to call the vet's office to make an appointment for my dog to get his shots, I have got to put it into my calendar before I hang up the phone. If I change the password for my family's Netflix accounts, I immediately put the new password in our family chat with I use keywords like new Netflix password, then put the password. Because later, when I'm like, wait, what was that password again? I can go back to the chat and search by the word password, and it will find all of the many places that we have done new passwords because something always seems to happen. Those are a few examples of things that work for me as far as externalizing things. There are so many others. We're going to go in more detail into these things in later episodes so that we can address some of the issues that come up. But for now, I'm going to wrap this little externalizing your executive functions talk up with a note to parents. You are your child's executive function right now. If you have an ADHD kiddo, they struggle with these executive functions as much more really than you do because they are further down the line in brain development. So when your child can't remember anything, can't which tasks, can't remember that they were only supposed to be on their phone for an hour and don't notice that all the time has passed, loses their homework, can't keep their binder organized at school, can't remember to not kick their shoes off in the middle of the living room. And they say, I'm sorry, I forgot. Or I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't thinking, whatever it is. They are suffering just like you, just like me, from executive dysfunction. They need help and guidance to develop these external methods as they grow, but they can do even as they're little, they can still start learning to do these things. It's hard. It is hard to be the executive function for your kiddos when you are struggling with it yourself. And I just want you to know that I understand and I see you, and we will talk more at other times about how we can work on these things for our kiddos. But moving on for today, tip number 3. Okay, so sometimes we can't get started on a task because we don't actually know what the task is. We don't even know what to do. So, look at, find one of your 73 discarded to-do lists. How much of that list consists of things like clean the house? That's too vague. It's too broad. When you look at clean the house, you see 473 different things that need to get done and not just one task. Cleaning the house is not a task. It's really, I'm not even sure if we would call that a project, but it is certainly not just one task. So instead of writing down clean the house, write down specific things that you need to do, like pick up the toys in the living room or mop the kitchen floor. If there are tasks that need to happen before you can do one of those things, you write those down first. Like, mopping the kitchen floor is not like the first step of a task, right? First, you have to go through and move the chairs out of the way. You have to sweep. You have to, scrape up the gummy that's stuck to the floor because your kid dropped it under there a week ago and you didn't see it. Is that just me? That might just be me. Anyway, so what if you don't know what the first step of the task is or what any of the steps in the tasks are? I would say then that your first step in that task is figuring out what the steps are going to be. I recommend using AI tools like ChatGPT. There is one called Goblin.tools that's super awesome. I will try to remember to link in the show notes. Those tools can be super helpful for breaking things down into smaller chunks. Even if it's not perfect, it can give you a starting place. And one of the, primary benefits, aside from actually knowing the things to do by breaking things down into smaller tasks, it also gives you that, like little warm, fuzzy feeling that you get when you marked a thing off your list. And the smaller the tasks, the more often you get to mark them off, get a little dopamine going, and it helps keep you moving forward. Final tip: be kind to yourself. Adulting is hard for everyone, even if it doesn't, always look like it for some of the other people. But when you've got ADHD, it's like playing a game on hard mode and everyone else is playing it on normal. You've got some challenges. It sucks, but we're going to deal with it. We are predisposed to negative thinking patterns, and for many of us, it is just an automatic reaction to anything that we have any mistakes that we have made. Our inability to complete things or to remember things or to organize things, whatever it may be. We often talk to ourselves terribly in ways that we would never talk to anyone else. So today, I want to tell you that you deserve to speak to yourself with kindness. I want you to start working on in your brain when you see a challenge that is anywhere, on that list of executive functions that we talked about, and you start feeling yourself going towards the negative thoughts. I want you to think about talking to your best friend or your sister or your mother or your child, whoever it is that might be struggling with something like this. If they were, how would you talk to them? That is the way I want you to talk to yourself. And if you find that hard to do, don't worry. That's normal. Totally normal. Do it anyway. Even if you don't feel it. You can say it in your head. I would strongly encourage you to actually say it out loud. But we'll start with in our heads if that's what you can do. Even if you're saying these things to yourself, but you don't actually believe it, do it anyway. And keep doing it. Fake it till you make it. That is what I'm going to leave you with. So, adulting is hard because ADHD messes with our executive function, but that doesn't make it impossible to get better at being adultish. Remember, your brain works differently, but you can absolutely build systems that work for you. And if what we talked about today isn't going to be your particular recipe for success, don't worry. I have plenty of more up my sleeves. And yes, I'm wearing a tank top, but you know what I mean. So, thank you for tuning in to ADHD Adultish. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss out on new content. And hey, if you're ready to dig deeper and get exclusive tips, tricks, and personal stories straight to your inbox, sign up for my mailing list so you'll be the first to know about new episodes, resources, and special content to help you level up your life with ADHD. Look for the link to my website in the show notes to join now and get started on building a life that works for you.